Thanks for joining me today again, you guys. This is part 2 of my interview with Rob Hamilton, who is the owner and musical director of Side One Band. And Side One has, they've actually like franchised into, I believe it's 4 cities now. So there's a whole lot that Rob and I talk about, both from a musical perspective, but also from the perspective of like owning and running a music-based business. So I can't wait for you to hear it. Let's go. So what have been, and I mean, you can name whatever names you want, but I'm actually asking less for names and more about just the actual relationships. What have been the important relationships in your career that have moved you forward, that have helped you get where you wanted to go?
Yeah. Well, certainly, as I've mentioned, like Semiamu, like
Mhm.
the high school environment that I was in, and all of the wonderful students, pros for just sort of creating that environment. My first guitar teacher, who introduced me to Ollie and had the great sense to just sort of like give up a great student. you
Yeah.
know, it's a hard sacrifice to do
Yeah.
because it's the right thing to do. And then of course Ollie, all of the all of the relationships I even made at Berklee. I still, my buddy will come to town who plays with Paul Simon, and we'll go out for a drink or whatever. And it's interesting to just hear that world. I
Mhm.
don't know a lot of like that world, like on
Yeah.
that kind of level, and the struggles, even for musicians on that level who are playing with some of the world's best. Very interesting. Um, and kind of like, it also makes me reflect on the choices that I've made in my
Mhm.
life, doing what I'm doing. And then, yeah, God, I think like every musician that you meet in like if you are starting to take this path of like you're going to become a professional musician, you're going to try to make your living off your instrument. And when I remember when I was in college, my dad, starting to hedge his bets a little bit and just going like, okay, well okay, I'm not going to talk this kid out of being a musician. Like maybe he gets his education degree kind of thing.
Mhm.
And I was so like headstrong that I wanted to like I felt like if I had something to fall back on that I would fall back. So I got my performance degree, which was kind of ballsy. And at the time at Cap, you probably remember there wasn't a lot of like performance majors at the
Yeah.
time. Like everybody was starting to go into the education stream. I think there was like when I graduated, there was only like 3 or 4 of us. And so, but I was really like sort of hell bent on using the guitar to make a living. And when you do that, I guess this is the same in sort of any, thing, but especially if you are like a contractor,
Yeah.
you are your own business, really. So like
Yes.
as this person going out into the world, like people are going to talk shit about you if you're if you're a dick, if you mistreat people, if you can't get the job done, if you sleep in, if you're like, I wasn't always like, I don't consider myself the most talented guitar player, but I could outwork anybody.
Mhm.
Like that was always my gift. I would always show up at the gig on time. I always knew my stuff. And I was just reliable. Like people would know, like, even if it was like 2 days to the gig, I would be able, like, I would stay up all night learning all of the material, even if
Mhm.
the gig paid $60,
Mhm.
because I just wanted to always be known as that guy. So every kind of interaction that you have with other musicians or people in the field, like, know that that is, going down on this permanent record,
Yeah.
of like who you are. And that was like, I think I learned that pretty quickly.
I think that that's a perspective that actually doesn't get addressed often enough, and that is that as a performing musician, what you are is a business. Like what you are doing is running a business. And I don't think that very many people understand that perspective. And I don't mean to take anything away from the art of performance. It's not that. It's the and also part of it that you actually have to understand a lot more of the back end pieces of it, because as a performer, you are a business
Yeah.
and there's more to it than just sounding pretty.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I'm thankful. Like usually there is a kind of continuum of like talent and just sort of flakiness,
Uh-huh.
where you'll have like super talented people that would just be like really, really flaky. And because they can, right? Like they
Mhm.
know they've got this gift from God and they're going to continue to get hired. I think you and I both know probably about half a dozen or a dozen people in this
Yeah,
town
yeah,
where it doesn't really matter how they behave. People are still going to hire them because it's such a valuable commodity that they have. But that only lasts for so long,
yeah.
And when I started my band, I sacrificed maybe, people that would are that talented,
Mhm.
but I just wouldn't hire them just because I knew I couldn't count on them,
Yeah.
to show up and learn the material, be on time, all of this kind of thing. So I'm fortunate that, I'm now in a place of prestige where I get both. Like,
Yeah.
all of my musicians and singers are all incredibly, I mean, just like it blows my mind how good the people I work with are and are that responsible. And
Yeah.
I even like joke with someone. I say like, you could just, like you've got the talent to just go full Mariah on
Yeah.
us, like demand a certain guacamole, but you don't. And it's like, it's so refreshing.
And those are the people that you wanna be with, are the people that have the chops, they've got all the stuff, and, like, keep it real. They're not
Yeah.
getting.
I don't take that for granted.
Yeah.
Like that it's important to make sure that everybody's needs are met and like everybody feels like, in with side one, one of the ways that we've been able to sustain such an incredible roster of musicians is that I've worked in projects where, and I see this a lot in like Toronto, especially, where it's like you're not allowed to play with other bands. Like there's all of these like
Ah.
y- there was even like when I was playing in certain bands in Vancouver, you know, if you needed to sub, like if you got some opportunity, like
Mhm.
some touring opportunity, but you have to play Mr. and Mrs. Smith's daughter's wedding, with this band.
Yep.
And it would turn into like an hour conversation, even if I had a sub or something like that, where I would have to plead and beg and essentially just bend the knee, like and it was we don't want that. Like when I put side one together, the way that we're going to attract the most talented people is to give them the freedom to do, the projects that they're very passionate about, whether that be an original project or
Mhm.
need to go off on a tour with some like incredible artist. And it's like, don't worry about it. We'll get it covered. We'll figure it out somehow.
Yeah.
Like, like
You don't want
this
that
is too good of
unofficial
opportunity.
non-compete.
No,
Yeah.
no. So, like that has been, again, now that I'm on the other side of the glass and I'm hiring people and that sort of
Mhm.
thing, like it's still that part of it where it's like you know, I'm my own business and I want to make sure that people want to come and work for me,
Yep.
now. Like not just be a hireable person, being, like an employer that's
Yep.
like, like uh, I certainly have demands and expectations of my musicians,
Yep.
as we've already kind of heard throughout. But I also like if you can deliver, it's going to be a good place to work.
Yeah.
You know, yeah,
Yeah. So let's talk about that transition from being like first and foremost a live performer to being an entrepreneur. And I know that you still play with side one, but really becoming the business.
Yeah.
You want to
Yeah,
talk about that journey a bit?
Yeah, I always, my family is very sort of business and that sort of thing, and there was always a strong kind of work ethic. So I always knew, like, there was probably some sort of max to how I was going to earn a living as a guitar player, as just a freelance guitar player in Vancouver. And I always supplemented my income with teaching. And I thought, well, maybe one day I'll open my own teaching studio or something. Like, I've got, even when I joined Soulstream, I think it was only like a couple weeks where Randall was like, and I was the youngest guy in the band when I joined, and Randall was like, "Well, I need to go on the road with Tom Cochran, and so you're going to be the leader." And I was like, and to be fair, like, I had sort of band led with another band that Randall and I were in. With Funk Delicious, and so he knew that I could be a leader. But it was just like it was funny that like, I'm bossing around people like Bill Runge and stuff like that, who are just these legends in the music. Like, I'm calling the tunes on this band that I've been in only for a few weeks. But Randall had the sense like, oh yeah, Rob can do this, and I think I've always kind of had that. So there's always been this kind of like, just kind of leader sort of vibe that I kind of have. And it's always just kind of come naturally to me. And so I always knew that, whether it was going to be like, I sort of thought about this teaching studio and that sort of thing. And so when I was playing in another cover band, and it just like, there was a lot of problems, like, in that organization. And I was on a wedding with Soulstream, and I was band leading, and the wedding planner there, we got to talking, and so she had this kind of idea, like, we were talking about this other band that I played in, and she said, well, I've tried to hire them, but they were so expensive. And I thought, oh, how much do we cost? And she sort of said a number, and I was like, well, I'm making my $200 a gig, and like, somebody's making,
a lot more than $200 a gig.
So it was kind of an eye opener for me, and I thought, well, this is something that I could probably do. And her and I eventually became a couple and started dating. And she was working for one of the big wedding planning firms at the time, and she sort of she decided to put her own wedding planning business together, and I decided to put my own cover band together. And from there, it was just like, that's kind of how. It was. And it was great because it sort of ping-ponged off of each other. If she got an inquiry for wedding planning, she would say, oh, we have this band that we can offer at a discount. Or, with the band, oh, if you guys need wedding planning. So it just sort of like grew. And she already knew quite a few of the players in the industry. And we slogged it out. We did a bunch of like wedding shows and that sort of thing, and built the brand. And it was, again, you can't build the brand on just nothing. It needs to have like something to it. And I think like our edge was, we had really great musicians. We were kind of like, I don't know, we weren't cheesy. Like, at the time, now no one's really cheesy anymore, but at the time, like in like 2009, it's like, there's sequins and there's vests and there's like the bad Joey Jeremiah hats that people are wearing. And, and we just thought, okay, like, your cover band at your wedding doesn't have to be a wedding band. Like, it can be like something, we can play some cool music. And actually, in the beginning, we probably played too cool music, and we're probably getting like we thought, oh yeah, we'll play Talking Heads, and people are gonna love it. It's like, nope, dance floor empties. It's like, they do want ABBA. There's a reason why these cliches are cliches. So, but we tried to not sell our soul too much, and again, it was the thing, like, we were always dependable. You could count on us if there was like songs that needed to be learned a certain way. We weren't going to, tell our clients like, we need 10 catered meals that the guests are having, and then not show up to eat them and stuff like that. Like, just like, being with a wedding planner too, she was aware of all of these kind of tropes, like these
Yeah.
horrible things that bands would do, and like how the mic wouldn't work at a ceremony and that sort of thing. So we really wanted to be like, just sort of like, everybody could just count on us to get the job done. And it wasn't long before, we had, because we have, our core players, we also had a bullpen of players in case like anybody had a tour or something like that. And I think like the first New Year's Eve, we got a second inquiry for a gig, and I thought, well, maybe we could have the subs kind of, do a band that night as well. And so we had two bands working, and that was always like, it was something that I had always sort of thought about too, is having this kind of franchise kind of idea. I know other bands would do it, but they would call it something else. They would be like, the cover, Undercover 2, it wasn't be like Undercover 1 and Undercover 2. And we never wanted to be that. We just wanted to be like the same good product that you could count on. And this would also sort of hedge if somebody got sick or something like that. Like the client wouldn't be like, "Where's Rebecca tonight?" kind of thing. Like we would never kind of guarantee any people. And we would just say, well, and we would just be honest. It was like, well, Rebecca needs to be at BronyCon in Baltimore to sign autographs for people who are, for, middle-aged men that are really into My Little Pony, that was actually a conversation I had with a client who was upset that Rebecca wasn't going to be at her gig. But then they got Ashley, and Ashley just like was kick ass, and they were like, "Oh, I'm so glad we want to have Ashley at our anniversary." It was like, yeah, of course you do, because everybody's awesome and it's great. You just don't worry about it. So, and then I always had the idea of like, why can't we do this in Calgary? Why can't we do this in Toronto? Why can't we do this in other places? And that's what it grew into.
Yeah. So you, as your bio said, you have a multi-million-dollar business. I understand this does not mean multi-million dollars in your back pocket, but the revenue stream of your business looks like that. Do you have any formal business education? We've talked about your music education and that your family comes from a business background. But do you have any business education, or are you kind of self-taught,
None,
flying by the seat of your pants?
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, like, we were saying before, like something that you know now that you want the younger, like I always joke, like if I could talk to the 18-year-old me or the 20-year-old me that's just getting into the music industry, I'd be like, learn QuickBooks. Like just have some sort of like accounting, kind of a little bit understanding. And so like, yeah, those kind of things. So no, there was no business. I don't even think I wrote a business plan for Side One. I think I'm like thinking about doing it. I've like, now I sort of flirt with the idea of like, like being a businessman. And I was like, well, I've got this, and yeah, we do, like last year we did $2 million in sales. And
Well
I
done,
thought, well,
sir.
that's a business, like
Yes,
that's
it
a
is.
real thriving business. And so I think, oh yeah, well, maybe I'll write a business plan. And there's like, after 12 years, and there's probably a lot of advantages to doing that. And I should, but yeah, I just kind of like, these things kind of, these problems that occur as a business owner will be, I think in philosophy, they call this like a priori, it will just sort of like, you'll figure it out, like from your armchair, it will just land in your lap and you'll have to figure it out. You don't need to know everything about the world. Like the problem will run up to you. So like, insurance and WorkSafe and like, accounting and GST and all of this kind of stuff just sort of like emerges. And if like I was a professional musician for 10, 15 years before I started Side One. So there was already like some of that. You are like, you file your own taxes and all this kind of stuff. So I already had a little bit of sort of understanding about what that, looks like, but this was just on like a massive scale. And eventually incorporation, and like, what does that mean? Like, when do I do that? Why should I do that? And how much does that cost? How do I start? Like all of that stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
now you get like the internet, right? And it's like, and now you have like SEO and advertising and
Mm-hmm.
all of this kind of thing. And so I just kind of learned as I went. And I just pray, like, I've been audited now
Mm-hmm.
before, like back in whatever it was, I was audited for 3 years, 2014, 15, and 16. And like
Oh,
when that happened, I was like, oh, great. Like I've got everything ready to go.
yeah.
Like here it all is. All of this kind of like hoarder shit that I've been doing, like with all this papers and this organizing and
I
like
feel you. Feel you.
like over sort of analyzing all of this stuff. It all just kind of paid off because I just kind of went, here you go.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Uh, trying to think if there's anything more interesting
Yeah.
to say about that. But yeah, it was just sort of fly, as you said, fly by the seat of your pants and figure it out as we go.
Yeah. Have there been any specific resources that you have appreciated for that learning curve?
Yeah, I did. Like I had a friend of mine who was a bookkeeper, actually friend of a friend,
Mm-hmm.
and she said, you gotta, this is like 2012 or something, so we were 2 years into it, and I had like a bunch of spreadsheets and stuff like that, and she's just like, you need to get on some sort of accounting program.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, QuickBooks or Simply Accounting, those are the two sort of places that people go. Go to QuickBooks, that's what most people use. So I was like, okay. So I just bought QuickBooks and we sat down at a Starbucks and she just showed me how to do an invoice, how to like match my bank records and that sort of thing. And it was enough to just sort of get me out of the gate. This one sort of like, 40-minute Starbucks sit
Yeah.
down with this bookkeeper. And then she's like, okay, like go out into the world and figure it out. And so like now you can just sort of Google any questions that you have. And now I
Yeah.
have like a bookkeeper and I have, accountants and that sort of thing. But I still do a lot of the books myself. And I actually kind of enjoy doing them
I
just
understand
because
that.
I can sort of see, like, I love, like, side one is based on, like, I'm a baseball guy. I love, like, data and numbers, even with, like, dance floor stuff. Like, we keep data on, like, songs that, are come to an end. And, like, when people leave the dance floor and priming, like, I joke as somebody who, is leading the band on a wedding. I'm a professional stereotyper. Like that's what I do. I look at crowds based on gender and race and
Yeah.
like all of these things, age, and I say you're going to like this
Yeah.
and you're going to like this and you're going to like this and you're going to like this and this next song is because of this stereotype and cliche I'm most of the time I'm right.
Mm-hmm.
And I've gotten pretty good at it, but it was a weird science to kind of learn. But now it's like it is a real sort of statistics and data driven kind of thing, where I review it after gigs and go through all of the stuff and make notes, and all my band leaders do as well.
Yeah.
So when it comes to all of like stuff like the accounting, like knowing your numbers is so important. Like and especially once we got into providing, like we own now a production company that provides, I always joke it's like Robert Duvall in The Godfather. Like we're a lawyer, but we only have one client. We're a production company, but we only have one client, which is us. And so getting into that world and like warehouses and trucks and gear is like, should I buy, a vehicle for Calgary? Should I and making these kind of decisions based on, the revenue that we're taking in
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that is, yeah, it's weird and fun. It's like ironically like some of the more creative stuff that I've ever done in my life, as somebody who's been a musician, an
Yeah.
artist, quote unquote, all their life, is now like I'm seeing like the creativity in business.
Yeah. I love that stuff. So I think that actually really appeals to those of us who work both left brain, right brain. I can never remember which is which, to be honest, but I know, music is more typically the like creativity side of, is that left brain?
I think that's the right. Yeah.
Right brain? Okay.
Yeah.
And then business stuff, that's more sort of like numbers and statistics and systems, and that is more typically the other side of the brain. And there are a few of us in the world, I that's where I sit, and my guess is that's where you sit, where we really draw on like both sides. And I think that kind of split split personality, dual personality, where you get to do both. You get the creative piece of music, but then you also see the creativity in the business of, in the systems of, in it, I get why that's fun.
Well, on kind of a related note, I remember having this student of mine. I don't know if this is BS or not, but I seem to remember him saying this. And a student of mine was a doctor, and he said, it's interesting. I was reading this thing the other day that they can now identify cadavers if they're musicians or not.
Really?
By looking at their brain. Yeah, they have this like overdeveloped, like sort of the bridge between those two sides is more
Really?
pronounced in musicians. Yeah. So I thought, wow, that's very fascinating and kind of unsurprising because you do need all of those things. Like
Yeah.
as you were saying, like the numbers and all of this, I was like thinking back to when we were talking about the numbers of like theory and
Yep.
that sort of thing. Like
Well,
there is all of that kind of activation happening when you're playing.
it's a thing that I think most people don't realize, is that music is math. And for someone who failed horribly at math in school, I think it's hilarious.
Pythagoras was a musician, right?
Yeah.
So there you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
All the great mathematicians were musicians at a certain point.
So my next question was going to be about talking about being a band leader versus managing a band, and you did just kind of talk about that. Is there anything more that you want to say on that, the journey from one to the other, or the difference between the two?
Yeah. Yeah, I think they are kind of separate things. Like,
Mhm.
like when I'm on stage and I'm band leading. I mean, there's certain duties that band leaders all have, right? You just gotta like when it's 20 minutes before downbeat and the piano player is not there, like,
Mhm.
okay, what are we gonna do?
I
Like
Let's start with that. For those who actually don't know, if you were going to give a job description of a band leader, what is that?
okay. The description of a band leader. Well, you are a liaison to the client, or the club or wherever you happen to be
Mhm.
playing. You're a liaison to the band. So we're going to go on at this time. Oh, things are running late. You've got to, communicate all of that kind of stuff. Musically, you're responsible as well. So with side one of the things that, was kind of people find kind of interesting is that I have a talkback mic. Well, all of our leaders have a talkback mic. So most of us, not all of us, again, we want to try to have our musicians feel as comfortable as they can on stage, but most of us use in-ear monitors now. It's great
Yep.
sort of, saving, when I got onto in-ear monitors, I was like skeptical at first. I was like, is it going to be okay? And then like 1 minute in, I was like, where have you been all my life? And so one of the advantages of being a musician inside one and using in-ear monitors is I have a little button that I push on my vocal mic so I can talk to the band and I can say, okay, we're going to skip this song. We're going to do medley number 17 now,
Mhm.
or like, hey, this isn't working, this is working, or hey, this is a little too slow. Like, let's pick up the pace here, especially like when you're watching people dance, right? If a song, tempo is so important, and we don't play to a click track or anything like
Yep.
that. So like we've got probably 20 drummers in our pool, and everybody's got their own sort of interpretation about where the song should kind of sit. And oftentimes that isn't, where the original recording is.
Mhm.
Sometimes you got to bump it up a little bit. You'll see this with DJs. If you go to hear a DJ in a club or something like that, they're usually not playing those tracks at the original speed.
Mhm.
They're picking up the pace a little bit. So that kind of thing, like as the band leader, my responsibility on a wedding or a corporate event where like is to keep the dance floor pumping, right? Like that's a big responsibility that essentially that is the
Yeah.
responsibility, for for the gig. So, and sometimes you'll hear this a lot. You're a band leader. You'll hear this, from the musicians. Like, you may have a disappointing gig where the dance floor was empty for most of the night, and you'll have some musicians that'll be like, "Well, I saw some people in the back, like they were bobbing their heads. They were, they were enjoying the music. They just weren't dancing." It was like, then we have failed them. Our job is to pack the dance floor.
Yeah.
That is essentially that's why people have hired us. It's not for concerts,
Yeah.
we're happy to
make
do
people
concerts,
dance and sell drinks.
That's right. So, which I love, that's and I get that there's crowds that don't dance and they enjoy the music and that sort of thing. But so as a band leader, I will, and I tell all my musicians this is like, it's your responsibility to have people dance. So drummers, have a look at the dance floor. I often tell people, like, imagine you're dancing. Like, if you're playing, imagine you were out there on the dance floor. Would this be the right tempo? Or would it be like a little too fast or a little too slow kind of thing? And like, let's adjust.
Basically, just play everything at 120.
Well, that's interesting. We can make a whole podcast about that. Yeah. And how that things have changed, like 120 to 130 was so important 5 years ago.
Yep.
And now, 105 is a big sort of thing. And, yeah.
Interesting.
114 has a special place in my.
I've been playing live for the last 4 or 5 years, so I did not know the shift in that. So that's
check out that Dua Lipa stuff, like boom, 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 boom. I mean, Dancing Queen. It's the biggest song that we have right now. Strangely, these songs, like, they come back, a few years ago.
Dancing Queen we always started our second set with Dancing Queen because it immediately packed the dance floor every single time.
Speaking of Randall Stoll, I remember asking him, like, what's your favorite song to play? And I remember him saying, like, Dancing Queen is so funky. It's like one of the funkiest songs. Like, the drum part on that song is so goddamn funky. And I was like, that was mind blowing hearing from him. And I was like, wow, there is something to that. I mean, most of us as musicians, like, I can play Countdown by John Coltrane, right? Like, why am I looking at the nuances of Dancing Queen? So I think, like, playing songs like that for a lot of musicians is like a secret shame, where it's like, this is where we've come in our life. Like, this is the rock bottom, right? Like, we're drunk in the alley, with the bottle beside us, strung out on pain meds, when we're playing Dancing Queen. Like, this is, but to start to see, the nuance and, like, the incredible, like, things that are happening in pop music, and, like, why that song, like, connects to people on the dance floor for one reason or not. I think it's its own, like, it's as valuable as learning a 2-5-1 or something like that as a musician.
And you know what? I got schooled one time. This was a good, 10 or 15 years ago, and I was playing, I think I was at the River Rock Casino, and Peter Baroni was playing, who plays with Dr. Strangelove. He was playing drums in our band, and I was complaining about playing Sweet Home Alabama.
Oh yeah,
one more time. And he said to me, not unkindly, but he said to me, there's a reason that people want to, like, there's a reason that we play that song every night. And it's because people want to hear that song every night. And it's like, our job is to be here to, just like you just said, it's like, our job is to pack the dance floor. Our job is to play the songs that people want to hear. And if that's the song that people want to hear, then, you know what I mean? Like, it was that piece of, like, it's actually a good thing for us to provide that for them. It's not, oh my God, one more time. And I went home and I really thought about that night, and I came back, and it kind of turned around, and now every time I play Sweet Home Alabama, I actually really enjoy it because I think about that conversation every time, and I think about the fact that, you know what? It's actually a privilege to be standing on this stage, getting to do something that I love, providing entertainment for people, and doing it in a song that they love.
Is there any limits to that, though? Well, I mean, think about it. Like, is there, with that, you could justify, you know, the most egregious of songs if you wanted to.
You
Like, the
could.
YMCA's and that sort
Yeah.
of thing. Is there any sort of boundary? Like, is there some song that you wouldn't possibly cross?
Well, I I don't know. I mean, I'd have to actually really give that some thought. But there are those songs. There's the Dancing Queens. There's the Sweet Home Alabama. There's the Brown Eyed Girl. There's the ones that we, you know, play like ad
Yeah.
nauseum, right? And it's not that they're not necessarily good songs to start with. It's that we've played them so many times as musicians that we're just sick of them. That's what it actually comes down to. And it's actually finding the point where you can be present in the music again. That's what I think it came down to. That conversation for me was finding that place where I could be present in the enjoyment of providing it again, rather
I think
than just sick of the repetition.
you know, something like, I mean, Sweet Home Alabama, I think I've probably played that song more than Lynyrd Skynyrd at this
Right?
point in my life. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think I've ever played that song perfectly. Like,
Yeah.
I always try to, it's a really, really hard song on the guitar, especially those
Mhm.
guitar solos to try to nail. And same thing with, I always joke, like, Don't Stop Believin'. No one's played Don't Stop
Mhm.
Believin' more than me on this planet. I think
Mhm.
I've played it more than any human being. And I still, there's two things. I'm still constantly trying to perfect that. My girlfriend will tell you every single day she hears just trying to get it more and more, and just like, I've never quite got it. There's been like 2 times maybe I've had it like just
Yep.
exactly what I wanted. And and to watch people connect to it, you know, like
Yes.
that's what's for me. Like, I don't really care what I'm playing as far, but if people like are losing their mind to it, which they always do,
Yep.
you know, like that's what's important to me. But there's another side to this too, which I think speaks to that sort of like demon Sarah. That's like they're the sort of, you know, the judgy Sarah, which I think
Mhm.
is okay.
That's okay. We
I
can
think
call her Demon Sarah. I don't mind.
I think like we don't have to be all embracing of all of this shit either. Like, you can hate Brown Eyed Girl, you know, and I do hate it. I don't like playing it just because of all the reasons that you said. We've
Mhm.
all played it so long. It seems too easy, you know, like
Mhm.
to just sort of like pull out, and people are going to be like, "Oh my god, is Brown Eyed?"
Mhm.
Yes. And that, you know, like you know, let's face it, like there's a reason why, you know, there's the Nickelbacks of the world,
Mm.
right? And, you know, like why they're, you know, they're huge. It's like, well, you know, there's people can have bad taste in music. That doesn't mean that you need to always cater to it. And so there is like this kind of balance. And I think like Erin, the wedding planner, we have since like split up and that sort of thing, but she's still
Mhm.
very much a part of the organization. And one of her things is always this sort of like the original sort of thought of this band. We're going to be a cool cover band, right? We're going to play
Mhm.
cool songs. But so she kind of keeps me in check because I'm the guy out there in the trenches that is like having to play the dancing queens and the brown-eyed girls to have the people enjoy themselves. But she says, like, you don't have to always do that. Like, people, like, you don't have to always cater to people's most base, you know, sort of
Mhm.
enjoyments all of the time. And I like it when we can throw in, you know, and I'm not saying like even cool, like cool music. Like, people are always surprised when we do a lot of hip hop stuff. Like, we'll do like, you know, Ride With Me by Nelly, and people will be like, oh my God, like cover bands actually like doing
Yeah.
and he's doing the rap, like the hard part of the
Yeah.
rap. And it's like, yeah. So like, that's the part where for me, I'm like, we can kind of like have this like balance of like some fun stuff that's like different and interesting, and then have like some of those cliches as
Yeah.
well to just sort of like pad in and around all of that stuff. So
Yeah, I agree. I think you got to give people some of what they want, for sure. So you do have to have some of those pieces in there. If you do all the stuff that's like fun for us to play, and you don't give them any of what they are really, really, those YMCAs and the whatever, that gets to be a harder night to keep the dance floor packed. But there can be a balance for sure.
definitely.
For sure.
And well, I mean, and understand too, is that the people who like the talking heads are not going to be the people that are driving your dance floor.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They're not. Yeah.
That's me.
Yeah.
I remember I had a New Year's resolution where I was like, I'm going to dance more this year. Like, I'm going to try to push myself to dance more. It didn't happen, but like, but that's the sort of thing, because I am that wallflower that, the guy in the back, like sitting back and judging the band and all that kind of stuff, and thinking like, why are they playing some cool songs as well? And so like, but again, like that person is not necessarily driving the dance floor. But what we do, I don't know, this is interesting and kind of different than what a lot of cover bands do. Like a lot of cover bands have like a song list, and their clients can, sort of like go through and like, okay, we want to hear this and this and this. And we don't do that at all. We get our clients to like make us a playlist, whether it be like actually just write out like a spreadsheet of songs they want to hear at their wedding, or like send us a Spotify or Apple Music playlist of just songs that they would like to hear at their wedding. And this gives us like a sense of their tastes. And also it gives us, like, we also ask for like, must-haves kind of thing. So as a separate kind of category. And between this, I sort of like, I take that, and then with our experience, I'll red flag some things. So if this happens with a lot of Seattle couples, which are like too cool for school, and they'll be like Sylvan Esso, and like, Broken Social Scene, and like Radiohead, and, like all this indie stuff. And so I'll like get on a Zoom with them and be like, okay, no one is going to dance at your, at your wedding. Like hearing your favorite songs is not going to make for a good party.
Yeah.
You want to have a good party, right? You want ties on heads. They're like, yes. And it'll be like, then we're going to play Timber.
Yeah.
Like that's
totally.
That's what needs to happen. And they're like, you know what? You're right. But with that too, like maybe we'll start the night with like Home by Edward Sharpe or something like that. Like something that might connect, or like, a Lumineers tune or something like that, that might be popular for everyone, and not, but also sort of satisfy like, the cool kind of part.
Yeah. For sure. I'm hating this because I actually have another appointment right now, because normally an hour and a half is like plenty of time, but I have like so many more questions I wanted to ask you about side one and managing it.
Whatever.
Go.
Yeah, well, if you want to set up again, just let me know. If you've got enough here, that's fine too.
Okay, I might do that because, yeah, I do. I have like about 10 more questions I wanted to ask you that are sort of specific to like the side one element of it. But so I'm not going to get you to do your whole like, where do we find you, blah, 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 because I'll get you to do that the next time. So I'll just send you the link, and you can pick a time that works for you again, and we'll finish it off another day.
Sounds great, sir.
Does that work?
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rob. This has been like super fun.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just great to see you again.
Yeah, you too.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. And I will see you again soon. We'll figure this out and we'll finish it off. This has been really fun. I'm sorry to leave abruptly.
That's okay. All right.
Okay. Bye. Thanks for listening in, you guys. So it turns out that Rob and I were just like really chatty, I guess. And we've got more to say. So I hope that you will come back on Monday, because you are going to get part 3 and part 4 of my conversation with Rob next week. There was just too much to shove into 2 episodes. So you are getting like the extended director's cut. Next week, you are going to get episodes 3 and 4, or parts 3 and 4 of my interview with Rob. So I look forward to